My name is Captain John Olson with the Minnesota State Patrol's Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Section. Federal regulations require that commercial vehicle drivers ensure their vehicle is in safe operating condition. As a professional driver, a thorough pre-trip inspection is key to ensuring your vehicle is in fact safe and ready for the miles that lie ahead. Today, Commercial Vehicle Inspector Sergeant Jessica Hukill and Commercial Vehicle Inspector Eric Sunby will demonstrate and discuss the best and most thorough way to conduct your pre-trip inspection. A thorough pre-trip inspection not only helps reduce vehicle violations during a roadside inspection, but more importantly, it helps prevent crashes and save lives on our nation's highway.
So we're going to start in front of the vehicle. First thing we're going to do is going to open the hood. We're going to check everything in the engine compartment. All right, while in the engine compartment, so the first things you're going to want to look at is pull the oil, engine oil dipstick, make sure you got plenty of oil in the engine. We're good. You also want to look over other fluids in the engine compartment area. Antifreeze reservoir, full. You got your fuel, you have your power steering. Look for any type of power steering leaks. The gearbox itself is secured, fastened, suspension frame, steer shaft. Again, all your mounting bolts, pitman arm, drag link ends for movement, anything you can see on the framing area, and down inside looking at the type of brake system. And you can probably see that these rotors are nice and shiny. That tells us the brakes have been at least working. And on the outside as well, which you go through a hand hole and you can see a nice shiny rotor surface. Once you're satisfied you're good under this side of the engine, we're going to go to the other side. Okay, once we get over to the right side of the truck, again, everything we pretty much looked at on the left side there as well. We want to look for any type of excessive oil leaks, no fuel leaks, any type of antifreeze potential leaks. Again, looking at the frame, suspension, brake system, brake hoses. What's going to be different on this side, we have a little bit better view of the belt system that runs your fan, air conditioning on this one, and your alternator. Make sure those are in good shape. And then down inside where your exhaust is off your turbo, looking for any type of exhaust leaks on the system, going back in there on the exhaust pipe, anything that's underneath that area, the driver's area, that could cause issues. Some things we want to look at. Okay, we're also going to want to look at the steering tire, just like we did on the left side, making sure you have good tread, at least 4/30 seconds on the steering axle. Again, look all around the tire for any potential damage that you could have or maybe picked up. Again, looking at the sidewall, both inside and out, for any potential damage. Looking at the rim itself for any type of defects of cracks, and then checking all your wheel fasteners to make sure they're nice and secured. And then checking to make sure you got oil in your hub and nothing is leaking from the outer hub in this area. Also a good time again to look at any type of brake issues through the hand holes. All right, so once we're done under the hood checks, we want to make sure the hood is securely closed. And again, make sure your hood is fastened on both sides, secured down. Again, make sure the hood is secured on both sides, locked in place, snap down. And on this one here, we got a nice piece to take care of all your deer. So make sure that is also secured up and tight. Okay, so once we're satisfied we're underneath the hood, we're going to get into the driver's compartment. Make sure the door, again, opens in and from the inside and the outside, opens properly for you. Once you get it opened up, check your steps coming up into the cab entry. Again, 3 points entry, so you have 3 points of contact, just to prevent those accidents. Crawling up into the truck, we're going to get in the seat here, and we're going to start this vehicle up and start to build some air pressure. All right, once we're in the vehicle, we're going to start this up and start to build some air pressure. It's an automatic, we don't have to worry about it's a neutral. Brakes are all still set. A few minutes for the computer to do its cycle, and we're going to start the truck up. All right, so while we're building some air, we can check the windshield, make sure we have no visual damage here that's going to interfere, especially with our vision. Again, making sure we have rear vision mirrors, and then adjust them if necessary on both sides of the truck. Get your adjustments ready while you're building some air pressure before we start to do some of these other in-cab checks. Along with checking out over the windshield, we want to make sure we got good wipers working. Again, we get a good look at the actual rubber mounts. Wipers are working. We're going to get them turned on here. We're also going to check the washing system to make sure it actually functions and cleans debris off the windshield. Make sure it's in the green, securely charged, not going to roll around in the cab and cause any issues. We can also start to check the horn. This truck's actually equipped with two. We only need one, but make sure you have at least one functioning horn in the vehicle. Inspect the seat belt itself for any type of damage potentially. And again, make any adjustments you might need as a driver. Make sure that's all in good shape and working. All right, as long as we're in the cab here, we're also going to want to look for any type of debris that potentially could be on the floor that could slide forward on a hard brake and interfere with foot control. So let's get this lid out of the way, put it over here where it's probably in a safer area for it to be. Making sure the steering wheel is securely fastened. Again, telescoping tilt steering wheels, make sure they're locked in the position that's comfortable for you, but make sure they at least lock in one position for you so it's nice and solid. Again, ensuring all your gauges are properly working. You've got your air pressure gauge, again, digital air gauges, oil pressure, fuel depth on this truck, and then your RPM gauges and speedometer, of course. We're going to check that when we start going down the road. Just making sure your gauges are all in good working order. Again, making sure also your defrosters are fully functioning and working. We're going to crank these ones all the way up here. You can hear good flow coming out of here. It's blowing good, so our defrosters are working. Keep our windshield clean, especially in the wintertime here in Minnesota. All right, so we're going to make sure we release the brake. We're on a nice level surface here, so we're going to release our parking brakes, truck and trailer. It's going to beep at us because we still have the door open. And we're going to shut the truck actually off. And we're going to do a cycle test to test the ABS light systems on this truck. So we're going to just basically turn the key to the off position, cycle the key back on momentarily, and we have a light that came on for the truck and the trailer and the dash, and then I can also view the ABS light on the trailer as it comes on and goes off to make sure our ABS system is functioning properly. All right, so we're full on air pressure, so we're going to shut this vehicle off. We'd actually release the parking brake. We're going to cycle the key just to check for the ABS system. There should be two lights on this truck. It's newer than 2003. Should have two lights on the dash that come on momentarily for our ABS on the truck and the trailer. Both came on in this area here, down here, and I can also look out the mirror and check the cycle of my ABS on my trailer to make sure everything is functioning properly. All right, so we're also going to do an air loss test right now on this thing. We've got full air pressure up. We're going to release basically again the parking brakes again, make sure we don't want to do any type of damage to the brake system by over compounding the parking brakes. And we're going to do an air loss test basically by stepping on the foot brake full to the floor and watching our air gauges. So the air gauge in the dash here should not slowly be falling. We want to hold it down for probably about a good minute. There's dual fold to this as well. If you're looking at an S-cam brake system, it's also going to help to keep your brakes in adjustment with the automatic slack adjusters built into these trucks. Once you're satisfied you don't have any type of air leak, again, watching your gauges, it's going to momentarily just come down a little bit for the application. It should stay right in that range. If you don't see any type of air leaks, because you'll be able to see them with this gauge, you might not be able to hear them with the Windy Weber we have. But with this gauge, again, if it doesn't fall, it's holding and maintaining air, we're in really great shape. That's a good check. After we've done that check, we're going to pump the brakes down and look for the low air warning device. And here we're getting a warning that shows up. This must be visual on any truck that was manufactured after March 1st of 1975. Must have at least a visual warning device. Very visual in this one. Another thing we want to make sure we check is our emergency triangles. In case you have any type of a breakdown. This is typically what most trucks are using now. 3 triangle flares. Make sure again they're all 3 in the pack and in good shape. Drivers should inspect this every day to make sure they are in there. All right, so we're at the front of the vehicle. Again, turn on all your lights inside. Just kick your 4-ways on. At least you're going to know the light's working. We can check our low beams. We went back inside. We can actually flip it into high. We're going to check high. We've got my partner inside the truck looking right now. Again, checking the outside of the windshield for any type of damage that we didn't catch on the inside. 3 ID lights, 2 clearance lights on the outside. If we step back far enough, we should be able to also see the clearance lights on the trailer, and you can see them on the sides. So we can check that from the front if you choose. Otherwise, we can do it on the side of the trailer. Also make sure that your lights are securely fastened. As trucks get older, sometimes they hit things, and these lights are flopping all over the place. Make sure they're nice and secured down. Again, checking your lights, make sure they're nice and secured, not loose, and both sides. Any type of windshield damage we didn't see from the inside. Your 3 ID lights, 2 clearance lights. And again, if it's a Minnesota truck, we're going to make sure this annual inspection decal is in compliance. Okay, so we're going to come down the side again, the side of the vehicle, carrier name, DOT numbers displayed. Again, checking, we've got air tanks down here, making sure they're nice and secured, not flopping around loose. We're going to take a look at the fuel tank itself, make sure it's got a cap, no leaks again, and all secured up. On the back of the truck tractor, anything was manufactured after July 1st of 1997, we've got to have this white conspicuity tape or a reflex reflector that's white in color. It kind of shows the shape of like an L or a backwards 7 up on the back of the cab someplace. Additionally, we're going to look at the hoses to make sure they're not chafing against anything, secured up properly. Hoses between the truck tractor here and the semi-trailer, and the light cord for any type of damage. We can also look at the frame assembly for any type of cracks in the frame as long as we're here. We can start to look even into the brake hoses going down to these chambers. We can start looking at suspension components for bolts here, how they're secured up. And we can start looking at the drive shaft for any type of damage that might be on the drive shaft just from the top side. A good view of that as a driver. They should be checking all those components, parts, and pieces. All right, we're also going to take a look at the hoses coming up to the glad hand connections. Not a bad idea as a driver. Make sure these rubbers for the glad hand hoses connections are in good shape, both your service and emergency. Making sure we have good glad hand rubbers in here. We don't want any air leaks. We didn't have any air leaks earlier when we checked it in the cab. So it's probably a good bet that we don't have an issue, but it's still not a bad idea to take a peek at these things just to make sure you don't have any problems and they are nice and connected up tight. This is also a good time if you didn't get the ABS light to cycle in the cab, depending upon the year of your truck. You could also come back in here, just unplug the light cord. Again, just replug it back in. If it is a constant feedback there, the ABS light should cycle on and off. And we checked and it actually did on this one.
Okay, so now we're going to move on inspecting the tires on the drive axles. So again, like we talked about on the front axle, we're going to be inspecting the tire condition all the way around for tread depth. We're going to be looking at any bulges, cuts, bruises, or abrasions on these tires. For these tires, we're also going to be checking for air pressure. So we can thump our tires or hit them. You're going to hear that nice noise coming from them. If you have a tire that's low on air pressure, you might hear a dull thud noise coming. That'll give you an indication that you need to check the air pressure on that tire. Then we're going to be looking at our rims again all the way around for any cuts in the rims, as well as our wheel fasteners. We're going to be grabbing onto those and making sure those are all secured tightly. And if you have a hub seal where you can see if you have lubricant, you're going to want to make sure there's a visible or measurable amount of lubricant and that hub seal is closed off. We're going to do this for both of our tires for condition, and then we're going to get in between them and we're going to check for rim condition in between the dual sets here, as well as the tire sidewalls in between the dual sets. Again, we're looking for cracks or any rim conditions, and then on the inside as well. Once we're in here, we can also take a look underneath and start looking at those brake chambers if we can see them. And then we're going to move to the fifth wheel. Okay, so while we're in here in between the dual sets of tires, we're going to be looking at our air suspension. We've got an airbag here. We're going to make sure that it is in place properly and we're not hearing any air leaks. And then we can also see into our springs and make sure they are mounted properly and there's no damage to them. While we're in this area, we can take a look at our brake chambers and our brake hoses, what we can see from right here. And then we can start looking into our suspension, making sure all these bolts are tight and that it's mounted properly for the suspension to the axle. So now we're going to move on to checking our fifth wheel. So this isn't a fixed fifth wheel plate here, so we're going to be checking all of our bolts and components to make sure it is affixed from the upper coupler to the lower assembly. We're going to make sure this locking arm is in place. If this were a sliding fifth wheel, we would be checking for fore and aft stops and making sure our sliding pins are in place. And then we're going to check the angle iron back here and make sure that is in working condition right there. And then while we're under here looking at the fifth wheel, we can also start looking at the cross members on the trailer. So from right to left side, looking at those cross members all across for damage or any cracks in them. Okay, so next on the fifth wheel, we're going to check that kingpin and make sure that those locking jaws you can see are in place around that kingpin, holding it tight. And while we're here, we can start looking at some suspension components between the axle, make sure everything is affixed tightly, and we can also again look at some brake hoses for any damage or wear right over here. And then we can still inspect our trailer cross members while we're under here from right to left. After we check the fifth wheel, then we're going to move to checking the rear of the trailer lights. So now we're going to be inspecting the lights on the rear of the truck tractor itself. we should have 2 turn signals, right and left side, 2 brake lamps there, 2 reflectors, and 2 hazard lamps as you see illuminated right now. Then we're going to look at our mud flaps. Mud flaps are not required if the truck tractor is under a semi-trailer. But if you do have mud flaps on, the conspicuity tape treatment is required on them. If you don't have the mud flaps on the truck tractor, the conspicuity is required on the rear of the truck tractor itself. So now we're going to be inspecting the side of the semi-trailer. To start our inspection on the semi-trailer, we're going to be looking at our conspicuity material. It needs to start at the front and go to the rear, cover 50% of the trailer and be evenly spaced. When we're walking down our trailer inspecting it, we're going to be inspecting the upper rail and the lower rail for damage. And then we're also going to be stopping and inspecting our landing gear and make sure it's up and in a locked position. We're going to continue down the side of the semi-trailer. If it is over 30 feet in length, we're going to need this intermediate side marker lamp, and it needs to be in operating condition, mounted properly and working. We're going to continue down, still inspecting our upper and lower parts of our trailer, back to our rear sliding axle. Okay, next thing we're going to check are the hoses that are going to connect up in here to our sliding axle. We're going to be checking the hoses for any cuts, abrasions, chafing, or damaged hoses here. The chafing would have to be actively chafing is what we're looking for. We want to make sure we've got these separators to keep them up and apart. And we also want to make sure they're not dragging on the ground while we're in normal operating condition. We're going to go back while we're under here and take a look at our rear axle. You can start looking at suspension components under here, our U-bolts, our spring leaves, as well as we can start looking at our brake chambers, brake hoses up to our air tanks, and our brake pads and linings under here. So we want to check all the brake components that we can check to make sure they are in operating condition before we leave for our workday. While we're under here, we're also going to take a look at our sliding fifth wheel. We have connection points here. We want to make sure that there's no damage, that there's no large cuts into the frame on either side. We want to make sure that there's no damage in any of our suspension components holding that sliding rail up in place. Then we're going to step out and look at our locking pins for the sliding rail and slider guides. Now we're going to be checking for our locking pins to make sure that they are fully engaged. We also want to make sure none of these holes are elongated from damage. Then we're going to look at our slider guides. We want to make sure our sliding fifth wheel is nice and in that slider guide, not sitting on top of it. We're going to have 4 slider guides. We want to make sure our fifth wheel is in place like this one is here on all 4 of them and that none of them are sitting on top of it. This will ensure that our sliding fifth wheel is locked into place when we travel down the roadway. Now we're going to come to our tires on our trailer. Again, we've got a dual set of tires. We'll be inspecting these tires the same as we inspected our drive axle tires on our truck tractor. So once we finish the inspection of the tires back here, we're going to keep going down the side of our trailer and we're going to look to make sure the required markings are there for our ABS lamp, and then we're going to check our side marker lamp to make sure it is red in color, mounted, and working properly. Now we're going to inspect the lighting devices on the rear of the trailer. The first lighting devices we're going to inspect are the 3 ID lamps that are at or as close to as practical the top of the trailer there. Then we're going to make sure that we have 2 clearance lamps, 2 tail lamps, 2 stop lamps, and 2 hazard lamps. Some of these lighting devices can be combined together. The minimum required lighting devices at the rear of the trailer is 7. These lighting devices need to be mounted properly and they need to be red in color. The exception to that is if you have amber turn lamps at the rear. For the lighting devices, we're also going to come down here and inspect our license plate lamp. This license plate lamp can be white in color and it does need to be illuminated. Once we're done inspecting the lights at the rear of the trailer, we're going to look at the conspicuity tape in the rear end protection. Depending on the year, there could be 2 different measurements for your rear end protection, but you want to make sure that it's in good operating condition, there's no damage to it. And then we're looking at the conspicuity treatment to go all the way across the rear end protection. Conspicuity treatment also needs to go across the rear of the semi-trailer, and then in the upper top corners you're going to have the white conspicuity tape, making an upside down L brackets up in those corners. At this point here is where we would check for load securement inside the trailer if it is not a sealed load. Once we're done inspecting the left side of the trailer and the rear of the trailer, we're going to inspect the right side of the trailer and the truck tractor. The right side is going to be a mirror image of the left side.
Hi, I'm John Houselot, president of the Minnesota Trucking Association. We're pleased to be a partner in producing this training video because we know highway safety is truly a partnership between law enforcement, roadside enforcement, and the drivers that are out there every day. We know that pre-trip inspections, if done right, reduce crashes, save lives, and keep trucks moving down the road. We hope that what you see from this video will help you do your job better. We know you're committed. Drive safe out there. Thank you.